Welcome back to another edition of
What this is.
Poetic Reflections on the Gospels.
Oh, yeah. What was the Poetic Riffs on the Gospel, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that is what it is. These are poetic riffs on the Gospel.
They are poetic riffs on
even
the
if they
Gospel.
don't know it, we are making them riff on the Gospel.
That's true. Well, the thing for this week is there's a lot of rich scriptures. It's basically the Good Shepherd passages. Psalm 23 is the psalm for this week, and John 10 is the gospel passage. The poems hopefully flesh out or riff on.
Yeah, let's dig right in. And of course, Psalm 23 is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then from John chapter 10, this is one of the I am passages, and having to do with the Good Shepherd and the gate. Sort of jumps metaphors, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
But here's a reading from the Gospel of John. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hears his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The metaphors in the gospel switch as it goes through the telling. He's at once the shepherd, and he's the door or the gate.
Do literature professors say not to do that?
I wasn't a literature major,
Okay.
but yeah, whenever I do my personal writing, I try not to mix my metaphor.
Right. Of course, he's not mixing. On one level, he's staying consistent with the metaphor, right?
True.
The shepherd.
Everything having to do with the sheep,
yeah.
he is it.
But what's interesting, if we go just slightly theological Trinitarian, is the ambiguity of, the threeness and oneness of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. Maybe the ambiguity is similar to the ambiguity, the Trinity.
Yeah, because there is that one section in the passage where he talks about the gatekeeper. Right. He doesn't say, I'm the gatekeeper. He says the gatekeeper opens the gate.
Right, yeah.
For the shepherd. And at that point, he becomes the shepherd.
Right.
And then he goes back to being the door.
Yeah. Right. But we got the shepherd imagery in here.
Right.
We got him playing a couple roles as that shepherd.
And the poems I've chosen focus more on Jesus's roles in these stories than our roles as sheep. I found poems that had a lot to do with sheep too. Mm-hmm. I felt like focusing on Jesus for these poems was going to be helpful.
Yeah.
The first poem is by William Blake. First of all, I want to tell you, I don't usually like these kind of poems. I don't like kind of older poems that use words like we don't use them anymore. I don't like the way it's easy to fall into like the rhythm of it. I don't like just the antiquated words like thy and thou and lots of apostrophes to make rhymes.
And as odd as it sounds, similar to old TV shows, sometimes they lack grittiness and they can seem too cute to us.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
not all of them. There's some really good gritty ones that are old too, but they seem to have that.
I was thinking of like old cowboy things where they like shoot each other and it's always or they hit each other and it's always
Yeah.
I was like, that's not how it really
That's not how it
sounds
really
when
sounds.
people get shot or when they actually get hit. William Blake is kind of a forerunner of the Romanticists who are going to come up in like the late 1700s, early 1800s.
Wordsworth, kind of a precursor. Wordsworth.
Yeah. He was very religious. Obviously, he had problems with the Church of England. I don't think any of that has anything to do with this poem. I like what he does with the shepherd image, and the name of the poem is "The Shepherd" by William Blake. How sweet is the shepherd's sweet lot! From the morn to the evening, he strays. He shall follow his sheep all the day, and his tongue shall be filled with praise. For he hears the lamb's innocent call, and he hears the ewes' tender reply. He is watchful while they are in peace, for they know when their shepherd is nigh. The reason I chose this poem is a lot of times sheep image is used where we're the ones going astray, and shepherds running out and bringing us back.
Right.
So what caught me about this poem is that second line, from morn to evening he strays, and then he shall follow all the day. That's kind of a reverse image of how I traditionally view this whole good shepherd thing working.
Yeah, and especially the emphasis on in the second stanza.
Yeah,
you've got his actions grounding the sentence. He hears the lamb's call. He hears, as opposed, and it was subtle, but as opposed to the lamb's calling and then he hears, right?
Right.
It's just it places the emphasis and the action, the weight of the action on the shepherd. But like you said, when a sheep strays, then it's like, oh, you've got the sheep generating all this drama and all the work being done. Is a sort of damage control,
right?
That the shepherd is having to do because of the stupid sheep. Whereas, this places a lot more kind of care, active care and cultivation that the sheep are doing. So all of the actions that they're doing, possibly even the straying that it doesn't say anything about, is actually made possible because the shepherd's not. Yeah. If there's a wolf out there, they're not going to wander.
Right.
Even the ability to wander is a sign of a shepherd, confidence in the shepherd. Yeah.
And so, so there's that aspect. That's overt in the poem. It's like, what? The sheep kind of know where they need to be, and the shepherd strays with them or follows them. But he's making the peace possible.
Right. And he's not dictating where they go. Like, go this way. Sometimes they do.
Right.
But I think it's equally important. This is real to how shepherds actually are. In the sense that there are times when the shepherd is going to lead them to green pastures. But then there's other times where the sheep find their own way to the pastures that they desire. And it's in harmony with what the shepherd wants.
There's a sense of letting sheep be sheep. And obviously this is a very caring shepherd, I think. It doesn't particularly say that.
Right.
But the shepherd, even in this sheep straying, still finds it very sweet. It was interesting to kind of hear that dissonance of he strays, and then he also thinks it's sweet. And I was like, how interesting that when we stray, Christ follows.
It's sort of Lord of the Rings in the Silmarillion, in the creation story. All of Middle Earth is created so that the main character, the god character, Ilúvatar, starts to sing, lets out this sort of note, starts the song. The Ainur, who are sort of the angels, co-creators, they start to sing. Anyway, Melkor creates discord, and at first, Ilúvatar smiles at him, and then incorporates the discord into the music, sort of like jazz would.
Right.
And so initially, as the story goes, there's nothing in the God character there.
Mhm.
There's actually room for discord with what he's doing. In fact, he likes it because it's a part of creation. It's a part of wandering and finding that beauty in creating. And it's only like 3 movements afterwards where Melkor is just intentionally trying to go against. That's clearly a different thing
Right.
than co-creating and creating discord.
Right.
I think of that music imagery as similar to a wandering imagery. There's a sort of playfulness, a room to make mistake,
Right.
that the shepherd allows the sheep to have. And maybe even that's how we co-create with God. It's not the end product. The mistake isn't.
Right.
You know, the wandering isn't the end product, but it's a part of the process. And maybe that's why the shepherd's okay with that.
I'm going to mention Keith Richards. I know there's a church setting, but he was saying that that's how he writes new songs. He makes a mistake and he goes, that was interesting. I like that the shepherd hears us at peace.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, I always think of the shepherd trying to save us from something. And in this poem, he hears us be how we should be to each other. He hears the lamb's innocent call and the ewe's tender reply. He catches us doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And that is it's more than a pleasure to him. He actually uses the word praise.
Yeah.
So I just love the way it kind of twists and turns things to show the freedom that God allows us, and that even as we stray and he strays with us, like we've been saying, that is potentially a creative process, a co-creative process with God, our good shepherd.
Yeah. So where did you find this next poem?
Well, I found it online, and I know that the poem was originally published in the Yale Poetry Review. I don't know anything about Malcolm.
Do you read a lot of the Yale Poetry Review?
No, I don't. I was desperately looking for anything having to do with shepherd things.
There you go. That makes sense.
Looking at all the pastoral helps I could find, and I came across this one, and I guess one of the interesting things about this poem, it's not about the shepherd. It's about Christ being the door of the sheepfold. We don't usually talk about Christ being the door. We may talk about Christ being the way.
Right.
We may talk about the gates of heaven, but they're always kind of outside of Christ himself. Whereas this poem latches onto that idea that he's the gate.
Yeah.
He's the door for the sheep. And another interesting little cultural tidbit. I read the story about Arabic sheep herders or herders. And
you better not say the one thing I was going to contribute to this.
Okay.
No, say it.
I'm sure. I'm sure it is.
Say it.
You say it. We'll say it together. 1, 2, 3. The shepherd is the front. Is the gate.
Is the gate. Yeah. All right. We did it together. Yeah. And I may or may not use this in my sermon.
Okay.
Which I'm preaching this
Sunday.
Yeah.
So just plug your ears.
No, but expound
right. Well, I mean, there's an actual pen for the sheep.
Right.
And there may even be a bar that goes over it. But when the sheep are in, the shepherd traditionally lays in front of the opening.
Right.
So that the wolves have to go over the shepherd to get to the sheep.
Right.
And the sheep have to go over the shepherd to get out.
If you think about first century Palestine, northern Galilee, poor. It's not like they have hinges, you know.
True.
I mean,
that's funny.
You might have some ropes, but even there's a lot of material that once you make your fence, you're not necessarily gonna have material for a door. I mean, you could, but anyway, it's that's what I also read, that once you get all the sheep into the pen, then the shepherd lays down, and the sheep aren't gonna. They can get out, but they'd have to jump over him.
Right, and then he'd be aware that they were there.
Anyway, I'm glad.
Funny.
Yeah. So we'll get to that because they mention that in the very last part of the story.
Yeah.
Of laying down across the breach, as it says. So
this poem, especially in the last part, you'll hear it. There's words that are very comforting and powerful. I am the door of the sheepfold by, I don't even know how to say the guy's name. Got Malcolm down. I'm going to go with Guite. Not the one that's gently hinged or deftly hung, like the ones you planned on Joseph's place. Not the well-oiled openings that swung so easily for pilots' practice pace. Not like the ones that closed in Mary's face from house to house in brimming Bethlehem. Not like the ones that no man may assail, the dreadful curtain, the forbidding veil that waits your breaking in Jerusalem. Not one you made, but one you have become. Load-bearing, balancing, a weighted beam to bridge the gap, to bring us within reach of your high pasture. Calling us by name, you lay your body down across the breach, yourself the door that opens into home.
What's your take on him starting off so many knots?
Well,
That's very apophatic. It's not this.
I mean, in a way that's very gospel-ish. I mean, Jesus spends a lot of his career explaining how what they thought the Christ was going to be is not what the Christ is going to be.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's a certain theology of negation that has to take place. Well, Jesus is like a door, but he's not like this kind of door. He's not the hinged or deftly hung ones that he made with his father Joseph. So he's not talking, I mean, the way I take those lines, it's not a door that he's even going to make. But it also says something about the skill level that the poet imbues with Jesus. Like, Jesus and Joseph were probably good at their trade. So when they made a door that it hung nicely. But he's not that kind of door.
Yeah.
He's not a utility door.
Now here's the other thing. The voice of the poem seems it was a peculiar choice, I thought, in terms of the poet is talking to Jesus.
Yeah, so it's a prayer.
As opposed to kind of third person, omniscient, like, oh, this is just how it is. The poet and the reader then has to take on these perspectives and these thoughts that are to Jesus,
Yeah.
which I think is an interesting choice.
Yeah. I mean, it really is changing from him to you. If you're reading this poem well as the reader, I mean, it becomes a prayer for you, hopefully. Yeah. You're the one who's having to address Christ using this I and you kind of language.
Or at the very least, it's incorporating you into a more relational aspect of the topic, as opposed to, oh, this is a story about this person over here that doesn't connect me.
That's true. You're connected to the story.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm now, by reading the poem, I am oriented towards Jesus and am forcing myself to contemplate, or not forcing myself, I'm guided in contemplating Jesus in the first person. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, the second person implies a first person.
Right.
As opposed to third person doesn't.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, Jesus isn't, well, I guess you could say he's the object of this poem.
Right.
But
I guess when you talk third person omniscient,
right.
We're getting a little too technical here, but third person omniscient.
It's something out there.
It's something out there
that we can discuss.
And the thing that's being discussed is not necessarily aware
part of the discussion.
But it's part of the discussion. So like when you read a book and it's in third person, the characters in the book are not aware of the reader. But when you go into first and second person, then it assumes that the topic at hand is aware they're being addressed.
Right.
You.
Right.
That means the potential of
there being a response.
Yeah, right. You're not this, you're not that, you're not this. Yeah.
Right. And I actually like this as a form of prayer, because sometimes you get rutted. I mean, you just get in a rut of praying, and it's nice every now and again to go, wait, not that, not that, not that.
Yeah.
So
because it could be this.
Yeah, it could be this. Right.
It's very logical.
To start off with Joseph is brilliant. It's like, yeah, he came, he was a carpenter, he hung doors, but it's not that.
Yeah.
It's not. We're not talking about that kind of door, that kind of skill. So then he moves on to pilot. Well-oiled openings that swung so easily for pilots' practiced pace. And you were talking earlier, first century Palestine, hinges.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, this is an allusion to power. This is an allusion to wealth as well. And Pilate is an interesting figure. And he's not like the doors in Bethlehem, which I'm going to just say very shortly. They were inhospitable.
Right.
To say
Exclusion.
the least.
Doors of exclusion.
Yeah. So he's not like that. And he's not like, and I couldn't figure out what the curtain he was talking about. Is he just talking about death, or is he talking about the curtain between the holy place and the most holy place?
I think because that part of that sentence, the dreadful curtain, the forbidding veil, that waits your breaking in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he is talking about the sort of literal and symbolic tearing of the temple curtain that separates the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
So not that one.
So not that one. Not an exclusive spirituality. Not an exclusive access to God.
Right. Or a door that implies distance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is sort of what the Holy of Holies is, a sort of respectful.
Yeah.
The divine presence is here.
On the other side.
Yeah, on the other side. So not that that's... Whereas, like, the exclusion doors are bad. I don't think this one is... Even though it says dreadful and forbidding, I think that's more kind of holy fear.
Right.
But at any rate, it's not that.
Well, the next images are about the cross, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It's load-bearing. It's balancing. It's a weighted beam. So I'm picturing the cross like an old tiny weight. Where you put weights on one side and weights on the other side to balance something. To bridge the gap. To bring us, and I love this because the image of the cross is, of course, Christ with his arms out. To bring us within reach.
We're still talking about these two threshold and this kind of a door, gateway, whatever, and what Jesus did on the cross. It's definitely not to be dismissed.
Right.
But it's not that.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's this nearness, there's this balance, there's this weight, and he's drawing us near, and I love the Irishness of this, to your high pasture.
Hi, United.
It's like, it's not just going to be a normal pasture, it's the high pasture. It's the green grass. Like when we lived in Africa, the higher you went in altitude, the greener the grass got.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, it's wicking the sky in some places, and it's just green. It's Ireland as far as you can see.
Yeah.
This isn't Africa.
Right, yeah.
Calling us by name, it all just becomes much more intimate to bring us within reach to the high pasture, calling us by name, laying your own body down across the breach, not building a door now, he is the door that opens where? Into home.
Mm.
It's the place you belong. It's the place you were made to be. It's the place where you have ultimate freedom. It's to be at home with God is where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And the imagery of Christ's presence, Christ's body, and what it is doing here. And I'm thinking in terms of function. Doors, we think about, the poem talks about these different ways in which doors function.
Right.
Gates, doors,
right.
Curtains, they all have a particular function.
Mm-hmm.
And the function here that's being emphasized is a function of not separating, but bringing into this home. That's a powerful image, and it's appropriate to have a poem that talks about it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. It's not all of these negatives.
Right.
Right?
What it is
this positive.
Yes.
Yeah. So we move on to little Wendell Berry.
Sheep or shepherds are not explicitly referred to. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd psalm, is alluded to. The presence of still water is part of this poem. And the reason I chose this poem is, one, because of that line and how it fits in with all the other things.
Yeah.
But two, these times, you just need a little Wendell Berry in your life.
Yeah, to help lead us to still waters.
Yes. Yeah. This poem is the peace of wild things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. This is a poem for our times.
Yeah.
For these times. I just think of the fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I'm at the age now where my brain starts working in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it can be a long time
Can be a long
back
night.
to sleep.
It can be a long night.
But I just think about, here's Wendell Berry. He's won prizes. He's, he's our comforting voice. But here's this person we all respect going, my life and the life of my children may be.
Yeah. Naming the fear that we all have, but also naming it in such a way where it's not this absurd thing that just a few people have, or you're not weird for having this, but it's something that grows and finds traction in anybody's consciousness.
Yes. I think it's just part of the human condition.
Yeah. And then one of the things that poems can be, and what he can be with his poem, is a kind of shepherd. He locates and names the fear of where we are, sheep-like. And then, as a good artist and a good poet does, it then makes that connection with us, that visceral connection, and then starts to lead us. Right?
And he does it in like 2 lines.
Yeah. I don't know if we could do it. You couldn't. I couldn't do it in 2 lines.
Yeah, you're there. You're awake at night. You're there.
And it's almost like, well, then we're going there with them. I go and I lie down with where the wood drake rests, his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. And this is, the hinge of the poem. It might literally be the middle line, or the line in the middle of the poem.
Oh, yeah.
I come into the peace of wild things. Like, that's the whole poem right there, because the wild things can not only be just the rawness of nature, but the wild things can also be these thoughts that we were talking about, right? And realizing that life, and even beautiful things like wood drakes and herons.
I love that image of the wood drake. He rests in his beauty on the water, so you can just see this calm water with a wood drake on it, and another wood drake is reflection. Yeah. What an interesting way to say that. Yeah. And I have a personal affection for herons.
Sure.
And when I lived in Eugene, I'd run by the Willamette River in the morning, and there'd always be this heron, like in the middle of the Willamette River, just standing on one leg, just kind of looking.
But he's there.
Yeah. I actually ended up saying goodbye to him, and every now and again he'd look down and eat a fish. Yeah. But for the most part, that's where he was, and that's where I was. Yeah. And you have this sense like, we're here together, and this is, there's nowhere else I would rather be. I think that's part of this poem. You see these things in their element, and you find out that's your element too.
Yeah. The other thing that it made me think of is how, especially as a kid, being out in the woods, in the wilderness by yourself can be terrifying and frightening. Yes. But then you go out there with, depending on who you are, but with me, like going out there with my dad or some other person who's been there before, you're still around the wild things, but there's this peace, and actually you're able to enjoy the wildness of creation when you're with someone who knows how to be at home in that territory. Huh. And I think of this in terms of reading the Good Shepherd into this, or even you could say this is the voice of the Good Shepherd. Yeah. Because Jesus knows our fears. Yeah. And
he bids you to come into the presence of still waters.
And do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. Come in the presence of still water. Yeah, and just how much energy, creative energy that could be used towards hope, towards creation, towards creation of beauty, towards cultivation. But when we start thinking of fear and grief, that's taking a lot of our imaginative resources.
Right.
And being able to name, that's what's happening when we lie awake at night with the fear running in our head. We realize there's a cost. That's
just
a tax.
for living.
Yeah.
Right.
And the tax of fear is you're losing these levels of peace, you're losing these levels of enjoyment. And the answer is not getting rid of the wild things, right?
No.
It's learning how to find that peace within them.
Which, going into the last couple stanzas, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. There's two things going on there. One is I always think of stars as eyes for some reason. So it's interesting to think that like stars are blind to the greater light that's coming.
Yeah.
But the greater light is coming.
What would you say the greater light is to the star?
I'm going to say the sun. I
Okay.
mean,
you're talking about at nighttime.
Yeah, at nighttime, the stars are waiting for the daytime to arrive.
Gotcha.
And of course, that's very spiritual metaphor too. Like we're living when we're in grief, when we're in fear, we're in the night. But even the blind stars above us know the daylight's coming. And so even as he moves from creatures to the heavens, I mean, there's that comfort, like the daylight's coming. And for a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
And it also says, waiting with their light.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a good call on that one.
They're
it reminds me of like the
their
story
light
of the
is
virgins.
Not,
they've got their lights out.
And their light is not inconsequential.
No.
That's
if you've especially these spring days, if you're outside and it's a clear sky, it looks like the stars are hung on different layers of strings. It's a three-dimensional sky. That's a good thing to point out. They have their own light, and it's not inconsequential.
And to maybe even associate our becoming at peace, coming into the presence of the still water. He even says, I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world. I am free. And to think that our own presence, we can often think about how big the fears are, or how big the things are that we fear, and just being collectively as a community, finding our own peace individually, like a star individually is not enough to be spectacular, be grand.
Right.
It's nothing compared to the sun, and at least from our perspective. But finding that peace is kind of similar to just the contentment of a star with its own light, realizing its role, realizing, it's not shedding a ton of light, but in collection with all of the stars, being at peace, being a part of the order of the wildness of creation, and then the inevitability of the sunrise coming. This is sort of strength in that, of both the humility of a single star as well as the peace and assurance of the strength of the rising sun. Anyway, those are more images that I'm sort of bringing up to the fore than necessarily pointing one thing out.
And one last thing, it says for a time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think when we think about peace, when we think about fear, when we think about grief, that if we just get away from it's not coming again. But one, it's not true. Heron is feeding on something. Somebody's not having a good day. It's also not true that we can't find peace in the middle of whatever we're going through.
Yeah.
That even in dark times, the sun's coming.
Yeah. And
even though we may not feel completely ourselves, we can be just like the wood drake resting in its own beauty, or a great heron feeding. Wild things give us peace, but those resources for peace are part of us.
Yeah. And this, of course, links into the Psalm 23. Ultimately, where all of our hearts are longing for is the door that opens home, still waters, green pastures, not in the terms of self-indulgent bounty, but is more in terms of there is a notion within us of what we were created to be, and that God is leading us towards that.
Yeah, when we think of abundant life, in that second poem, it talks about pilots practice pace. You know, it's not about wealth or power necessarily. That poem and this poem bring us to more of a sense of what is abundant life. It's home.
Yeah, and how home can be even in the midst of something frightening. And that's maybe even the dynamic of Christ coming in the tangible moments of our lives, even within the fear, and helping us to finding that green pasture or that still water or that home even within that context. Yeah.
And for a time, we're free.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you for enjoying poetry with us. We hope you continue to find enjoyment, and we hope it brings you some level of peace, if not peace, a little exposure to some beauty. Amen.
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 Hallelujah. Be healed. Go in peace.